If someone had told me the catch was my comfort, I'd have unclenched sooner. Gia Lin surfaced to the softest sheets she'd ever touched, and the kind of hangover that made her regret every choice since birth. Her skull throbbed in time with her pulse. The room smelled like lavender and money, and something was off. Silk twisted around her legs. Her mouth tasted like champagne and bad ideas. Her phone was missing. Her bra hung from a lamp. She cracked one eye open and instantly wished she hadn't. Sunlight knifed through floor-to-ceiling windows, spilling over a skyline far too pristine to be anywhere near her apartment in Northbridge. This was not her place. This wasn't any place she recognized. She turned her head slowly, dreading what she might see. And there it was, the second shock. A woman sleeping, naked, and not just any woman, a stunning woman. Her back was turned. Dark hair spilled across the pillow. Smooth skin half covered by the same sheet that barely clung to Gia's body. Gia sat up too fast. Her head throbbed. Her heart pounded. Panic bloomed in her chest. She didn't do one-night stands. She didn't sleep with strangers. She didn't even drink that much except apparently last night. She scrambled off the bed, stumbling a little, looking for her phone, her clothes, her memory. The room was pristine and expensive. High-end furniture, soft carpet, a mini bar stocked with labels she'd only seen on Instagram. The suite screamed VIP. That's when she saw the TV remote on the nightstand. Grateful for a distraction, anything to drown out the shame curling inside her. Gia grabbed it and hit power. The screen flickered to life. A news anchor appeared overly bright, speaking with the enthusiasm only morning people and psychopaths seem to possess. And in just 2 weeks, President-elect Eleanor Whitaker will make history as the youngest woman ever elected to the office. Her transition team has released no official statement since last night's private fundraiser. Though several sources confirmed Gia stopped breathing, she turned toward the bed slowly like she was in a horror movie. Hey, if you're enjoying this story, go ahead and drop a like to help us grow even more. And let me know in the comments. On a scale from 0 to 10, what score would you give this story so far? Your feedback makes all the difference. The woman began to stir. A soft groan, a stretch, a sleepy, raspy voice. Is that the news? Gia stared. The woman turned to face her. And suddenly, the pounding in her head had nothing to do with alcohol. Gia knew that face. Everyone did. It was on magazine covers, billboards, debate stages. It was the face of the future leader of the free world. The woman Gia had apparently slept with last night was President-elect Eleanor Whitaker. Oh my God, Gia whispered. Eleanor blinked at her, clearly still half asleep. You're Gia's voice cracked. You're the president. Eleanor frowned, then winced. Not yet. Her voice was husky dry. Technically, not for 2 more weeks. Gia stumbled backward, almost tripping over a Louis Vuitton duffel bag. She didn't own what the hell happened last night. Eleanor sat up, wincing. I was hoping you could tell me. I don't remember anything. Neither do I. This can't be real, Gia said, half laughing. I must still be drunk or in a coma. Maybe I hit my head. I assure you, Eleanor said, rubbing her temple. This is very real. Unfortunately, there was a long pause. Both women looked at each other, and then at the exact same time, they said, shit. It was chaos after that. Gia tried to locate her pants. Eleanor cursed under her breath as she dug through a purse the size of a carry-on. There were no staff visible, no aides, no security, no press. But Gia was certain that someone would walk in any minute and ruin her life. Why were you even out last night? She asked as she hopped on one leg trying to put on her jeans. Don't you have a country to run? Not until the 20th, Eleanor snapped. And I get 1 night. 1 night off script. Well, congratulations, Gia muttered. You went completely off script. I don't even know your name. Gia froze. It's Gia. Gia Lin. Eleanor looked at her. Really looked at her. Gia could see the shift. The recognition trying to catch up. Wait, she said. You're a journalist. Gia's stomach dropped. No, 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 not like that. I'm freelance. I do human interest pieces and profiles on indie filmmakers and restaurants with B ratings. I swear I'm not here for a scoop. You sure about that? Eleanor said, voice cool now. Dangerous. Because from where I'm standing, this looks a lot like a scandal waiting to happen. You think I planned this? Gia snapped. I don't even know how I paid for my half of the Uber yesterday. Eleanor opened her mouth to respond, but then her phone buzzed. She picked it up. Her expression went rigid. My security detail is in the lobby. Oh God. They can't find you here or me like this. Then what do we do? Eleanor glanced toward the window. There's a service stairwell at the end of the hall. If you can get out without being seen, I'll handle the rest. Gia hesitated. And if I can't? Eleanor looked at her, something unreadable in her eyes. Then this story becomes a problem for both of us. Gia's throat tightened. Got it. She grabbed her coat, her shoes, her dignity, what little of it remained, and paused at the door. For what it's worth, she said, you are amazing. Probably. Eleanor smirked. Likewise. Then Gia slipped out, heart pounding, praying she could get back to her anonymous life before the world figured out what had happened. Neither of them knew yet that this wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning. Gia didn't breathe until the elevator doors closed behind her and began their slow descent. Her heart was still hammering, her brain fogged with adrenaline and disbelief. Her coat was inside out. Her boots were untied. Her bra was still somewhere back in the presidential suite, likely hanging from a door knob or wedged between 100 thread-count sheets. She leaned against the cool mirrored wall and stared at herself. Her hair looked like it had survived a wind tunnel. Her eyes were wide, frantic. Her lipstick was smeared in a way that felt personal. God, what the hell had she done? When the elevator reached the ground floor, Gia slipped through the service corridor, keeping her head down. One glance behind her. No Secret Service agents, no cameras, just a bellhop yawning near a side exit. She mumbled something that vaguely resembled early flight and bolted into the street. The cold air hit her like a slap. Reality came with it. She had slept with the President-elect of the Federated States and escaped like a criminal. Or a secret lover, or something much, much worse. She didn't know which version terrified her more. Gia didn't go home. Not immediately. Instead, she found the nearest diner open at 6:43 a.m., ordered black coffee and toast, and sat in a corner booth like someone in witness protection. Her phone had 12 missed calls from Tess, 3 new assignments in her inbox, and a single text from an unknown number. Let me know when you get home safe. She stared at it for a long time. As in Eleanor. As in the future leader of the free world who had just texted her like a nervous one-night stand. Gia didn't reply. What could she even say? Hey, thanks for the sex and national security crisis. She deleted the message, or tried to. Her finger hovered over the screen, then backed away. She turned her phone off and shoved it into her coat pocket. This never happened. She would move on, laugh about it someday, maybe, hopefully. But she couldn't stop thinking about the way Eleanor had looked at her, half sleepy, half curious, and entirely too honest. Or the smirk when Gia said, probably. That smirk had burned itself into her memory like a branding iron. Meanwhile, in a completely different world, 10 floors up and 2 universes away, Eleanor Whitaker stared at the empty bed, the faint imprint of Gia's body still visible on the sheets, and wondered what the hell she had just done. Her assistant, Sabrina, was texting nonstop. The transition team needed final approval on her cabinet pick. The communications director was panicking about her lack of public appearances. The inauguration was in 13 days, and she was sitting on a hotel bed with her hair still damp from the shower, staring at the lipstick stain on her pillowcase. She had slept with a woman whose name she only remembered after a 30-second Google search. Gia Lin, freelance journalist, mostly harmless, cute as hell, smart. Her writing was sharp, even when she wasn't trying to be provocative. Eleanor had read a piece she wrote about a community garden in Riverside Borough 3 months ago, and remembered thinking, this girl sees things differently. And now she'd seen Eleanor differently, very differently. Up close, intimately, with her guard down, no suits, no speeches, no podiums. Just breath and skin and hands gripping too tight and mouths hungry for something they hadn't named. Eleanor let her head fall back against the headboard. The next week passed in a blur of cameras and press releases and constitutional briefings. Eleanor was back in Potomac City, back in blazers and careful language and orchestrated photo ops. She gave speeches. She signed papers. She posed with children in small-town diners and smiled like she wasn't suffocating inside her own skin. But every time she closed her eyes, she saw Gia. Gia in her oversized sweater. Gia, half-dressed, half-terrified, standing in the golden light of a hotel morning. Gia looking at her like she wasn't a symbol, wasn't a headline, just a woman who had made a wild human mistake. And maybe not a mistake at all. Gia tried to move on. She pitched stories. She met deadlines. She went out with Tess and pretended to care about karaoke, but her brain was stuck on a loop. Not the sex. Not exactly, but the softness, the tension, the strange, quiet way she'd felt seen. No one had ever looked at her like that before, like she mattered, like she wasn't just a blur in someone else's background. One night, almost 2 weeks after the disaster that shall not be named, Gia got home to find an envelope slid under her door. No return address, no stamp, just her name. Inside, a Meridian House inauguration invitation. At the bottom it read, in handwriting, VIP +1. Hope you still like chaos. Gia sat on her floor holding the invitation like it might ignite. It was impossible, reckless, insane, and yet her only thought was, does she still think about me? Her phone buzzed again, a new number this time. The text was simple. If you're coming, wear something dangerous. Gia didn't hesitate. She typed one word and hit send. Always. Gia didn't own dangerous. Her closet was functional. Black jeans, button-ups for freelance gigs, hoodies that had outlasted multiple heartbreaks. But 2 hours before the presidential inauguration, she barely recognized the woman in her mirror. A deep crimson dress hugged her curves like temptation in fabric. The neckline dipped just enough to whisper scandal, and her lipstick matched the precise shade of recklessness. Tess had helped choose it. If you're crashing a historic moment in the president's life, might as well dress like a power outage, she'd said. Gia had rolled her eyes then, but now her hands trembled as she smoothed the fabric over her hips. She wasn't just going to the inauguration. She was going to see her again, the woman who'd kissed her like oxygen. The woman about to become the most powerful figure in the world. The woman who'd left an invitation on her floor after 2 weeks of pretending Gia didn't exist. She arrived early. VIPs always did. The crowd was enormous: dignitaries, diplomats, senators, celebrities humming with anticipation as cameras flashed like lightning. Gia's name had clearly been placed on a list. Security ushered her through with professional politeness. No one questioned her. No one recognized her. And yet as she took her assigned seat front row, close enough to see the D's, Gia felt like everyone could hear her heartbeat. The music began. The announcement echoed through the civic green. Ladies and gentlemen, please rise for the President-elect of the Federated States, Eleanor Whitaker. And there she was. Eleanor appeared in a sleek navy suit, her hair pulled back in a style that said composed but lethal. Her steps were confident, measured. Every camera turned. Every pair of eyes followed her. But Eleanor was looking for only one. And when she found Gia in the crowd, she blinked. Just once. Just enough. Then her lips parted in a breath Gia could feel across the distance. For a moment, it was just them. After the oath was sworn, the applause thundered. The president was official. History had been made. But Eleanor's gaze still found Gia again and again between press handshakes and stage smiles. Like she couldn't help herself. The reception was private invitation only. Marble walls, gold accents, champagne towers, and the best string quartet in city. Gia felt like a fraud walking through the grand ballroom, clutching a flute of champagne she hadn't touched. She didn't belong there. "And yet you came," said a low, velvet voice behind her. Gia turned. Eleanor stood there a safe distance away, but closer than she should be. Her gaze swept over Gia from head to toe. Slowly, deliberately. "I got your note," Gia said. "Which one?" "The one that said, 'We're something dangerous.'" Eleanor's eyes glinted. "You understood the assignment." Gia tilted her head, mouth curving. "I'm surprised you had time to think about me between saving democracy and posing for Vogue. I thought about you every day." Silence pulsed between them. Then Gia said, "We shouldn't be talking like this." "I know. Someone could see." "I know. Then why are you?" "Because I didn't want a day to happen without seeing you." Gia exhaled shaky. "You're the president now." Eleanor's voice softened. "And I'm still the woman who can't stop thinking about how you kissed me and ran." "I didn't run. You vanished." "You told me to." "I told you to survive." "Same thing," Gia muttered. Eleanor stepped closer. It didn't feel casual that night. It didn't feel like a mistake. Gia swallowed. "No, it didn't." Eleanor hesitated. "Then come with me where?" "Somewhere without cameras." They slipped through a side hallway, ducked past staff, and found a service elevator. When the doors shut behind them, everything dropped away. Gia turned. "If someone finds us, they won't." "You sure?" "No." And then Eleanor kissed her. It wasn't soft. It wasn't tentative. It was fire and memory and 2 weeks of pent-up frustration crashing between them like a storm. Gia kissed back with everything she hadn't said, her hands in Eleanor's hair, Eleanor's arms anchoring her like a promise. The elevator stopped. Eleanor pulled away, panting. "My private office is down the hall." Gia smirked. "Are you propositioning me, Madam President?" Eleanor's eyes were dark. "I'm saying I've waited long enough." They didn't make it to the office. Somewhere between stolen breaths and slammed doors, they found a room with a couch and a lock. And the second time they came together, it wasn't chaos. It was confirmation. Afterward, Gia lay tangled in Eleanor's arms, heart thudding. "We can't keep doing this. I know you're the president. I know this could destroy everything." "Then let it," Eleanor whispered. "Because what I felt with you wasn't something I can ignore. Not anymore." Gia turned her face into Eleanor's neck. "I don't want to be a secret. Then be something more." "I'm scared." "So am I." They lay in silence until Eleanor said quietly, "Stayed night. Just tonight. I'm not asking for forever. Just for one more stolen breath." Gia hesitated, then nodded. "Because what do you do with a night you can't forget and can't repeat? You live it, even if the world's about to find out." Gia woke up to the faint hum of distant traffic and the unmistakable softness of a couch. Too expensive to be in any normal office. Her legs were tangled in a throw blanket that probably cost more than her rent. The air smelled like sandalwood and politics. Beside her, sprawled and barely dressed beneath the same blanket, lay Eleanor Whitaker, the President of the Federated States. Not President-elect, not future anything, President. Fully sworn in, fully real. And Gia had just spent the night wrapped around her like a bad idea that tasted too good to resist. She sat up slowly, careful not to wake her. Her entire body ached in a good way, in a "how is this my life" way. Memories from the night before pulsed through her like electricity. The tension, the release, the way Eleanor had looked at her after like she was trying to memorize Gia's entire face. Gia rubbed her eyes. She needed to leave. She needed to leave right now. This wasn't her world. She didn't belong in it. And the longer she stayed, the more impossible it would be to untangle herself. She stood, found her dress from the night before crumpled over the arm of the couch, and carefully slipped it back on. Her heels were by the door, her bag mercifully still zipped. As she turned the handle, a voice behind her stopped her cold. "You're really going to run again?" Gia turned slowly. Eleanor was sitting up now, the blanket draped across her chest, hair mussed, face bare. But her eyes, sharp, steady, were fully awake. I'm not running, Gia said softly. I'm leaving before I become a problem. You can't spin away. You think I regret last night? I think you can't afford not to. Eleanor stood, wrapping herself in the blanket like armor. Do you want the truth? Always. I haven't stopped thinking about you since that night. Not one day. You've haunted me, Gia. And it scares the hell out of me because I don't do this. I don't feel this. Then why keep pulling me back in? Because it wasn't supposed to be real. And now it is. Gia's breath caught. Eleanor, I'm not asking you to be my girlfriend. I'm not asking for some fairy tale. I'm asking if you feel it, too. Gia looked at her for a long time, then whispered, yes, and that's exactly why I need to go. She turned the handle again. Eleanor didn't stop her this time. But just before Gia slipped into the hallway, the president said, one night is dangerous. 2 means trouble, but 3 means we're doomed. Gia didn't respond. She couldn't. 3 hours later, she was back in Northbridge eating leftover pad thai from a takeout box and trying to convince herself her phone wasn't going to ring. It didn't. Not for 2 days. Then it did. Unknown number. 1 word. Lunch. She stared at it for 10 full minutes. Then no names, no cameras, just lunch. Gia texted back. Fine, but I'm picking the place this time. Eleanor replied, as long as it's not in a bunker. They met at a small cafe in Arlington, hidden between a bookstore and a laundromat. It was the kind of place that made decent coffee and looked aggressively boring. Perfect. Eleanor arrived in dark jeans and a hoodie, hair pulled into a messy bun, sunglasses covering half her face. Gia was already seated, sipping tea, pretending not to care. Eleanor pulled off the glasses and sat down. You came, she said. You texted. Gia answered. You picked this place. It's got good pie. I've had better pie. Then you've never had my pie. Gia quipped, then instantly regretted the phrasing. Eleanor choked on a laugh. Well, that escalated quickly. Gia rolled her eyes, trying to hide the smile. Look, we can't keep doing this. I know. So, what do we do? Eleanor looked down at the table. I don't know. I'm a leader of a global superpower, and I don't know how to date someone without destroying them. I'm not asking you to date me, Gia said carefully. I'm asking you to choose because I can't keep being your secret. Not forever. Eleanor exhaled slowly. It wouldn't be forever, just until things settle. Until I get control of the narrative. That could take years, Eleanor. Or weeks or never. Eleanor met her gaze. Are you saying goodbye? I'm saying. Gia said that I don't want to fall for someone who's going to keep me hidden like a liability. You're not a liability. Then prove it. They sat in silence. The pie arrived. Neither touched it. Finally, Eleanor said, I'll call you tomorrow. Why? Because I'm not ready to lose you yet. Then figure out how to keep me. Gia stood and don't call until you do. She left the cafe without looking back. Eleanor didn't move, just stared at the untouched pie, trying to decide which part of her life she was about to ruin next. Gia didn't expect the call. Not really. She told herself she was fine, that she was moving on. She dove head first into work, accepted a string of uninspired freelance assignments, even flirted half-heartedly with a photographer at an industry party. But none of it stuck. Nothing felt like anything because while her inbox filled with deadlines, her chest stayed hollow. And every time her phone buzzed, she still hoped it was her. And one night, it was. The screen lit up with a number Gia had saved under a name she hadn't dared say out loud. Eleanor, if I'm ever that stupid again. Hey, came the voice low, warm, cautious. I thought I wasn't supposed to call until I figured out how to keep you, Gia said, hating how easily her voice cracked. I think I have, Eleanor replied. I need you to come to city. That's not how it works. Please. That word from her. Gia should have said no, but she didn't because every time Eleanor asked, some part of her always answered. She arrived at the Meridian house 2 days later. The staff was discreet, the car unmarked, the entry through a back gate. Gia hated every second of it. Eleanor met her in the West Wing. No suit, no cameras, just soft eyes and attention Gia could feel across the room. "Thank you for coming," she said. "You don't get to thank me yet," Gia replied. "Tell me why I'm here." Eleanor led her to a small room, intimate, secure, empty except for a leather couch and 2 glasses of wine. "We're safe here," she said. "No one's listening." "You sure about that?" "I'd bet my presidency on it." Gia didn't sit. "So, what is this? Another secret?" "No," Eleanor said, standing still. "It's the start of telling the truth." She walked slowly toward Gia, stopping just close enough. "Do you know what the first lie I told the country was?" "That you were straight," Gia said, arching an eyebrow. Eleanor almost smiled. "No, that I believed in compromise more than conviction. That I would do anything to keep the peace. That nothing would come before duty. And now I'm starting to realize that if I have to deny who I am just to lead, then maybe I'm not leading at all. I'm surviving. And what does that have to do with me?" Gia asked barely above a whisper. Eleanor reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. "It's a draft of a statement. If I release this, it becomes official." Gia took the paper. Her eyes scanned it. It wasn't just a statement. It was a coming out, an acknowledgement, a risk. And her name, her real name, wasn't in it. But the message was clear. "I am the woman who loves another woman, and I'm not ashamed of that." Gia's throat tightened. "This could ruin you. It could free me," Eleanor said. "And what about me?" Gia asked. "What happens when they come looking for the woman behind the statement?" Eleanor stepped forward. "Then I hope you'll let me stand beside you when they do." Gia felt the full weight of it. Not just the risk, the choice. After everything, after lies, distance, silence, and fear, Eleanor was choosing her. And it scared the hell out of her. "I don't want to be a footnote in your legacy," Gia said. "You're not. You're the part I'll fight hardest to keep." "You're not just coming out," Gia said, blinking fast. "You're declaring war on the machine that put you here." "Then I'll go to war for you," Eleanor said. Gia finally let herself sit. Her legs felt numb. "This doesn't end with applause, you know. This ends with blood in the water. Then let them bleed." Eleanor knelt in front of her. "Just don't walk away again. Promise me something first. Anything. When the world comes for me, you won't flinch." Eleanor reached for her hand. "Gia Lynn, you are the bravest damn thing that's ever happened to me. And I swear on my name, on my office, on us, I will not flinch." Gia closed her eyes. She didn't say yes, but she didn't leave. And that was the beginning. 2 days later, Gia woke up next to her again. This time, it wasn't in a hotel or an office couch. It was in Eleanor's private residence. The morning light spilling across a bed that had only ever held one. Now it held both of them. She lay still, listening to Eleanor breathe. She felt the weight of what they were about to face. She also felt something else, ready for the first time. She wasn't trying to run. She wasn't hiding. She wasn't wondering if it was all going to break. She just was. She reached for Eleanor's hand under the covers and whispered, "When you release the statement, I want to be there." Eleanor turned toward her, eyes half-lidded. "You will be." Gia smiled. "Then let's burn it all down." The official Meridian House press briefing was scheduled for 9 a.m. Eastern Time. By 8:42, every major news outlet had a camera pointed at the briefing room. The air buzzed with speculation, the kind that had teeth and adrenaline. Most assumed it would be a last-minute cabinet change, maybe a new foreign policy initiative. None of them expected what was coming. Not really. Gia sat in a private room, shielded from the chaos, but able to hear the rising murmur through the walls. Her palms were sweating. Her knee bounced uncontrollably. She wore a navy dress, conservative enough for Potomac City, but still fitted enough to feel like herself. Tess had helped her pick it over FaceTime. "You're not walking in there looking like a martyr," she had said. "You're walking in like a woman who belongs." The door opened. Eleanor entered, flanked by two aides who immediately stepped out again once the door was closed. She looked composed, presidential, but her eyes searched Gia's face like she needed to memorize it before everything changed. "You sure about this?" Gia asked, voice barely audible. "I'm sure about you. You realize once this starts, we can't undo it." "That's the point." Eleanor stepped forward, brushing a loose curl behind Gia's ear. Her hand lingered on Gia's cheek, grounding them both. "You're not a weakness," she whispered. "You're the reason I remember who I am." Gia leaned into her touch, her heart thudding like it wanted to burst free from her ribs. "Then let's go change the world." The press secretary took the podium first, issuing the usual greeting, laying groundwork with practiced poise. Then she said the words that detonated the room. "President Whitaker will now deliver a personal statement. She will not take questions at this time." Gasps, camera shutters, a surge of whispers. Eleanor stepped up, calm as a thunderstorm. "I've always believed that the truth is a burden worth carrying, especially when it's uncomfortable, especially when it's personal." She paused, let the silence breathe. "There are things I've never shared publicly, not because I was ashamed, but because I was afraid. I've spent years making decisions from a place of caution, but today, I'm making one from a place of courage." Gia could see the screens, the headlines already being typed, the faces of reporters frozen in disbelief. "I am the first woman elected to this office. I do not take that lightly, but I will not lead this country while hiding parts of myself. I am a woman who loves another woman. That is not a liability. That is not a scandal. That is my truth." The room was stunned. Absolute stillness. Eleanor continued, voice unwavering. "She is brilliant, independent, stubborn, infuriating, and brave. And I'm lucky to love her. That is all I have to say about it. Thank you." She stepped away and walked directly through the double doors leading to the hall, where Gia stood frozen, trembling. Eleanor didn't pause. She walked straight to her, ignoring aides, ignoring flashing phones, and took Gia's hand. The second their fingers laced together, everything changed. That afternoon, the world lost its mind. The internet exploded. Social media turned into a battlefield. Headlines ranged from Whitaker's shocking confession to love in the Meridian house. Some anchors cried, some raged, some tried to spin it into strategy, but no one could deny it. It was real. Eleanor Whitaker, the President of the Federated States, had come out in front of the entire world, and she had chosen to do it standing beside Gia Lynn. They didn't hide. They didn't issue clarifications. They just lived it. That night, safe behind secured doors, they sprawled on the residence couch, sharing a bottle of wine while the country unraveled on television. "I think I just detonated the entire government," Eleanor said, barefoot, hair undone. "You did it with incredible cheekbones," Gia replied. "Do you regret it?" Gia asked. "Do you?" "No." "Then I don't either." A beat of quiet followed everything heavy, yet freed by the absence of secrets. "Some people are calling it brave," Gia said. "Some are calling for impeachment. Some are already shipping us on Twitter." Eleanor laughed loud, unguarded. "God help us." Gia rested her head on Eleanor's shoulder. "You know it's not over, right? The media storm, think pieces, attacks, obsession. I know. And you still want to be here?" Eleanor turned, suddenly solemn. "I didn't come out to the world just to watch you walk away. I wasn't planning to," Gia whispered. They kissed slow, deep as if the outside world could burn if it wanted. Inside, they had found something worth the fire. Not a scandal, a revolution. The backlash came instantly. Within hours, protesters crowded the Capitol with handmade signs from Morality Matters to America First, not lust. Across the street, a rainbow flag the size of a tour bus snapped in defiance, while a sea of supporters chanted, "Love is presidential." Pundits on both sides lost their composure. Some called it a distraction, others called it brave, still others called it treason. And in the center of it all sat Jia Lin, curled on a chaise lounge in the East Wing residence, watching her name crawl across every news ticker in the country. Unidentified woman confirmed as romantic partner of President Whitaker. Mystery girlfriend sparks global frenzy. First lady or first mistake. She wanted to scream, or run, or climb into Eleanor's lap and never move. But instead she sipped cold coffee and stared at the screen like it might swallow her whole. Eleanor entered without knocking. She never needed to. Gia felt her before the door even opened. She turned to look, but her expression didn't soften. "It's worse than I thought," Gia said. "It's going to get worse before it gets better," Eleanor replied, voice calm, but her eyes tired. She crossed the room and sat beside Gia, close enough for their legs to touch. Gia didn't move away, but she didn't lean in either. "They're calling me things," Gia muttered. "Dangerous, manipulative, a ploy. I know. And you? They're threatening hearings. Whispers about invoking the 25th Amendment. Jesus Christ, don't worry. I'm not going anywhere." "Maybe I should," Gia said, standing abruptly. "If I disappear, the noise dies down. You keep your job. The country moves on." Eleanor was up in an instant, blocking her path. No. Don't you dare martyr yourself for my convenience. This isn't about you." Gia snapped. "It's about the thousands of people tearing my life apart right now because I fell for someone I had no business falling for." Eleanor flinched. "You think you didn't have the right to fall for me? I think I didn't have the right to stay." "You do have the right. Then why does it feel like everything around me is collapsing?" Eleanor stepped closer, softer now. "Because the world doesn't know how to hold something this rare without trying to crush it." Gia blinked fast, the pressure behind her eyes burning. "I'm scared, Elle." It was the first time she'd said it out loud. Eleanor reached out and cupped her face, thumbs gently brushing away the tears before they could fall. "So am I." Gia melted into her touch. "We're not safe. We're not secrets either. Feels like we are. Feels like we're living between closed doors and careful whispers. And I don't know how long I can survive in here." "Then let's open the doors." Gia looked at her. "You mean let's give them the truth in full color?" Eleanor's eyes were lit with something dangerous. Determination, fire, love. "I want to walk into the next Meridian House dinner with you on my arm. I want you sitting front row when I address the nation. I want people to look at you and know you are not a phase or a strategy. You are my partner. That'll break the press. Then let's shatter them." Gia stared at her. The idea was impossible, irresponsible, reckless, and suddenly the only thing she wanted. "You're insane. I'm in love." Gia felt the words crash into her chest like a wave. "Say it again." "I'm in love with you, Gia Lin. You've never said that before." "I was waiting for the right moment. And now the world's on fire, and I want to burn beside you." Gia lunged forward and kissed her hard, desperate, full of fear and desire and the absolute chaos of being loved out loud. Eleanor pulled her closer, gripping her like an anchor in the middle of a storm. When they pulled apart, breathless, Gia whispered, "If we do this, it's forever. No more hiding. No more pretending. Forever," Eleanor said. "But only if you choose it." Gia nodded slowly. "Then I choose it." That night, the Meridian House issued an official photo. The president standing in the rose garden, hand in hand with Gia, smiling like the world hadn't tried to tear them apart. No statement, no caption, just one image. The internet ignited again, but this time it didn't feel like drowning. It felt like rising because love didn't whisper anymore. It roared. 3 days after the photo was released, the first death threat arrived. It came handwritten. No return address, no fingerprint trace. Just a simple envelope slipped into the Daily Meridian House correspondence pile. like it was any other piece of mail. Eleanor never flinched. Gia did. By the end of the week, they'd received 26 more. Some came in masked as harmless comments. Others were more direct emails, anonymous voicemails. One letter simply read, "You ruined America. Sleep with one eye open." The Secret Service doubled security. Gia was assigned her own detail. Agent Cole, tall, silent, deadly calm. Gia didn't like it. She didn't like the feeling of being escorted into her own life, of being watched every time she reached for a coffee or took a breath that might be misinterpreted. "I'm not the president," she snapped one morning as Cole followed her into the East Wing kitchen. "Why are you all acting like I'm a nuclear weapon?" Cole didn't blink. "Because, ma'am, you're the only thing in this building that can break her." Gia froze. "She'd go to war over you," he added. "And they know that." Eleanor hadn't slept in 2 nights. Her inbox was flooded with urgent alerts. Coded language from party leaders asking if she'd consider strategic adjustments to her personal circumstances. Senators were turning cold. A major donor pulled out. 2 cabinet members submitted quiet resignations. She knew what they wanted. Apology, distance, damage control. They weren't going to get it. But she also knew something else. The moment Gia became the most public part of her life, she also became the most vulnerable. Eleanor was reading a classified briefing when Sabrina, her assistant, entered without knocking. Her face was pale. "We have a problem." Eleanor didn't even look up. "Which one?" "Your father's giving an interview. He's going off script." That made Eleanor look up. "Define off script." "He's claiming your relationship is a political stunt. That you're unstable. That your administration is in moral freefall." Eleanor sat down the folder slowly. "Is he sober?" Sabrina hesitated. "I see," Eleanor said quietly. Gia was reading the transcript of the interview when Eleanor found her. "I told them not to show you that. I needed to see it. He doesn't know you. He doesn't know us. He just knows how to twist a knife in public," Gia said, standing. "Now the country thinks you came out for attention. That I'm some crisis PR maneuver. They'll forget by next week." "No, they won't. Not while half the Senate is questioning whether you're fit to serve." Eleanor stepped closer. "Do you want to leave? Do you want me to?" "Never." "Then what are we doing, Elle?" Her voice, steady for days, finally cracked. "Surviving." "No," Gia whispered. "Fighting." Their eyes locked, and something shifted, fear burning off into fury. "You're not the only one who can face a camera," Gia said. The next day, she walked to the press podium alone, no schedule. No script, just a journalist-turned symbol taking back her name. Staring into the wall of lenses, she said, "I'm not a politician. I'm not a campaign. I'm not a headline. I'm a woman who fell in love with another woman. And if that love threatens the fabric of this country, maybe it wasn't stitched that well to begin with." The room fell still. "I won't apologize for being here, and I won't vanish to make people comfortable. President Whitaker didn't choose me to make a point. She chose me because she saw me, and I see her clearly. That was it." She stepped off stage and straight into Eleanor's arms behind the curtain. "You didn't have to do that," Eleanor whispered. "Yes, I did," Gia said. "They're not just coming for you anymore. They're coming for us. Now we stop surviving." She met Eleanor's eyes. "We start winning." That night, as the country reeled from Gia's unscripted statement, an encrypted call came from the chief of staff. "There's chatter," he said. "3 governors want hearings on abuse of power. They claim your relationship compromises national stability." Eleanor was quiet a long beat. "Let them try, Mum. If they think loving someone openly is abuse of power," she said, "they've forgotten what power was ever for." She hung up and turned to Gia. Curled on the couch, Agent Cole a shadow in the hall. "They're coming harder now," Eleanor said. Gia held her gaze. "So are we." They didn't hold hands. They didn't kiss. They just sat there, 2 women in the eye of a storm, more united than ever. Because love didn't just make them brave. It made them a threat. There were no quiet days anymore. Every moment felt like strategy. Every gesture, every blink, every step across polished White House floors calculated for optics or survival. Gia could barely keep track of which news outlets were still spinning the narrative, and which had turned it into a crusade. Late-night hosts made jokes. Comment sections turned to battlegrounds. But the worst came in the form of polished men in tailored suits sitting around mahogany tables, whispering about preserving the dignity of the office while trying to gut it from the inside. The formal hearings began 3 days after Gia's press appearance. Framed as an inquiry into executive misconduct, they were televised, dissected, and weaponized. Gia wasn't mentioned by name, but everyone knew what this was about. Power, image, fear. Eleanor wore a steel gray suit and a gaze that could shatter mountains. Her voice, when she took the oath before the committee, didn't shake. Gia watched it all from a secure room in the West Wing, surrounded by a wall of monitors and a silent Agent Cole at her side. She'd never seen Eleanor like that. Fire disguised as ice. Do you believe your personal relationship has interfered with your ability to serve this nation? One senator asked. No, Eleanor said. Do you acknowledge that your decision to go public was a deliberate political statement? I acknowledge that being honest is only considered political when you're not a straight man. Do you think the American people want this kind of distraction from their president? Eleanor leaned forward. I think the American people want a leader who tells the truth, not one who hides it in shame. I think they want someone who believes love isn't a threat to national security. Gasps, cameras clicking like machine guns. Gia exhaled slowly, hand clenching her phone. Her face was everywhere now. Opinion pieces titled "The Girlfriend Who Changed Potomac City" flooded the media. One anchor called her a modern-day Helen of Troy. Another said she'd cost the administration its credibility. But none of them could touch what she and Eleanor had built in the shadows, piece by piece. That night, Eleanor returned late, looking like the war had followed her home. Her shoulders were tense, her jaw locked, but her eyes, those only softened when they landed on Gia. They're turning everything into a circus, she muttered, collapsing onto the edge of the bed. They want to break us, Gia said, kneeling in front of her. Because we didn't break first. Eleanor laughed hollow. They're trying to impeach me for being in love. Let them try. They're going after your history, digging into your exes, your college records, your old articles. I know. One of them quoted a poem I wrote when I was 19. Was it bad? Mortifying. Gia crawled into her lap, straddling her thighs, resting her forehead against Eleanor's. Let them dig. There's nothing they can find that'll change this. Eleanor wrapped her arms around her, pulling her tight. They want a reason to make this a mistake. To make you a mistake. Then give them nothing but proof that I was your best decision. The next morning, Gia made a call. Not to the press, not to her agent, to her mother. May, she said softly, Tala. Her mother paused, then said Viela sim antio jerkas piva, wiped a tear from her cheek. Abrata now esi iskan Mays fel haneo dika els t agarmnenka. Mays, the committee voted to delay the decision on the hearings not because they believed Eleanor but because her approval ratings had inexplicably risen, particularly among young voters, queer voters, and women of color. America wasn't collapsing, it was changing, and it terrified the people who built it to stay still that night. Eleanor appeared on national television for a live one-on-one interview. Gia stood backstage out of frame, but within reach. Why risk so much for one relationship? The journalist asked. Eleanor didn't blink. Because it's not just one relationship. It's the first time I've ever been fully myself. If I lose everything because of that, at least I didn't lose her. Gia's chest swelled. She hadn't asked for this. Hadn't wanted to become a symbol or a headline. But now, watching the most powerful woman in the world declare war on silence just to keep her, she knew some things were worth the fire. When Eleanor left the stage, she didn't wait for cameras to cut. She walked straight to Gia and pulled her into a kiss that wasn't gentle. It was bold, public, irrevocable, and the world watched. Let them. The kiss scene across America dominated the news cycle for 72 hours. Social media turned into a battleground of declarations, memes, threats, and confessions. One late-night host called it the kiss that launched 1,000 op-eds. Another simply said, "Well, guess we're all gay now." But while the public roared, something more dangerous stirred beneath the surface. Quieter, colder, and far more intimate. Betrayal. It started with a leak. A blurry photo of Gia leaving a secure area of the West Wing at midnight, accompanied by the words, "How much access is too much access?" Within hours, rumors of Gia reading classified documents began to spread. The headlines weren't about love anymore. They were about treason. Eleanor's advisors scrambled. PR firms rotated emergency shifts, and Gia, for the first time since stepping into this political firestorm, began to break. "They think I'm your spy," she said, throwing a tablet onto the bed where Eleanor sat reading. "They're calling me a security threat. I write poetry and drink too much coffee. I don't even know how to open a PDF with a watermark." Eleanor stared at the screen, jaw tight. This didn't come from outside. This came from someone in here. What? She stood furious now. That photo, that angle, that corridor. There are only 6 people with access to that section of the building at that hour. For our security, one is you, the other is Gia. Went still. Sabrina. Eleanor closed her eyes. She's been distant lately. Cold. I thought she was just overwhelmed. She used to like me. She still does. That's the problem. It hit Gia like a punch to the gut. Are you saying she? She was loyal to the version of me that didn't need anyone. They confronted her that night. Sabrina stood in the corner of the residence's study, arms crossed, expression unreadable. "You leaked it," Eleanor said. "I did." "Why?" Sabrina's voice was clipped. "Because you used to listen to me, and now all I see is you making decisions with your heart instead of your brain." "I am the president," Eleanor said. "You don't get to decide how I love. You asked me to protect your legacy. I changed what legacy means." Sabrina's voice cracked. "She's not worth the empire you built." Gia stepped forward. "I never asked her to give anything up for me, but she did." Sabrina spat. "And now she's on fire and you're standing there with the match." Eleanor's voice dropped to a dangerous calm. "You're dismissed, Elle," I said. "You're dismissed." Sabrina hesitated, then walked out. The silence after was heavy. Gia stood by the window, arms folded. "She's not wrong." "Yes, she is," Eleanor said, approaching her from behind. "She just thinks love is weakness. I know it's the reason I still get out of bed in the morning." Gia turned to face her. "I don't want to be the reason they burn you down. Then be the reason I survive it." That night, they didn't touch. They didn't kiss. They lay side by side, breath sinking, backs almost touching, hearts pressed into the silence. By morning, Eleanor had issued a public statement, confirming Gia's complete lack of involvement in any government affairs, and announcing the resignation of Sabrina as a regrettable necessary shift in leadership trust. The media howled. Conspiracy theories multiplied. Protesters camped outside the Meridian House. But something else happened, too. A poll emerged. One no one expected. Young voters, women, queer communities, marginalized groups. For the first time in modern political history, a sitting president's approval rating among under 30 voters had skyrocketed. They didn't want perfection. They wanted someone who bled like them. Someone who chose love, even when it cost. That night, Gia stood in front of the mirror, hair down, no makeup, an old hoodie hanging off one shoulder. Eleanor came up behind her, met her gaze in the reflection. "You look like the woman who terrifies Potomac City," Eleanor whispered. Gia smiled faintly. "You look like the woman who makes it worth it." They didn't say, "I love you." They didn't need to because they were still standing. And that was more powerful than anything a traitor could leak. The Meridian House never truly slept. But in the days following Sabrina's dismissal, The tension in its walls turned sharp, almost electric. Gia could feel it humming through the floorboards, whispering through phone lines, pulsing in the glances of staffers who used to nod and now looked away. The administration was bleeding, and while Eleanor's public ratings were soaring among younger voters, the institutional machine beneath her feet was growing increasingly restless. The whispers became meetings, the meetings became memos, and the memos became something far more dangerous, an ultimatum. The document arrived sealed, delivered by a member of the Joint Committee on Presidential Conduct. It was 2 pages long, typed in cold clinical language, and signed by 7 high-ranking officials. It didn't accuse Eleanor of criminal wrongdoing. It didn't mention Gia by name, but its meaning was clear. The continued presence of her romantic affiliation had become a threat to national cohesion, and they would no longer support her unless she addressed the optics decisively and responsibly. Eleanor read the letter twice, then folded it, slid it into her desk, and stared out the window without speaking for several minutes. Gia entered the room without knocking. I saw their cars. What did they want? Eleanor didn't look at her. A sacrifice. Gia's heart sank. Me? Eleanor stood, turning to face her, eyes unreadable. They're framing it like strategy, like a negotiation. If I distance myself from you temporarily, they'll stop pushing impeachment. They'll restore faith in the office. And will you? Gia asked, voice brittle. Will you give me up to keep your throne? You think this is easy for me? I think it shouldn't be easy. Eleanor moved toward her, face sharp with pain. If I don't do this, they'll tear everything down. Every law I passed, every bill we fought for gone. They'll say I was a distraction, a delusion. And what am I supposed to be? A placeholder, a secret, a casualty? No. Then say it. Gia's voice broke. Say that I'm more than this job. Say I'm worth burning it all for. Eleanor's jaw clenched. I can't burn the country for one person. Gia took a step back as if the air had turned to glass between them. Then don't pretend you were ever different from them. Gia, if you leave me now, I won't wait. The room felt suddenly too large. Eleanor reached out, but Gia didn't move. Don't touch me unless you mean it, she whispered. Eleanor's hand dropped. I have to think. You already did. That night, Gia didn't sleep at the Meridian house. She didn't go back to her apartment either. She wandered the city, hidden under a hoodie, ignored by strangers who passed too quickly to recognize her face. She ended up in Tess's apartment at 3 a.m., sitting on the kitchen floor with a glass of vodka in one hand and silence in the other. Tess didn't ask questions. She just sat with her. So, that's it. Tess asked eventually. You're letting her go. I didn't let her. She let me. Maybe she thinks she's protecting you. Then she doesn't know me at all. Back at the Meridian house, Eleanor stood alone in the Oval Office, rereading the ultimatum under dim light. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She simply whispered Gia's name once, soft, like it might bring her back. It didn't. The next morning, the press released a carefully worded statement. In the interest of political unity, the President and Gia Lynn have agreed to take time apart. This decision was mutual and made with deep respect and admiration. It wasn't mutual. It wasn't respectful, and Gia didn't agree to anything. She read the statement while waiting for a cab, fists clenched in her lap. It didn't feel like heartbreak. It felt like betrayal dressed in a suit and tie. Meanwhile, across the country, something else was happening. Letters, messages, videos, people posting photos with signs. Gia Lynn is not the problem. Love isn't unpatriotic. Our president finally acted human, and you punished her. The hash still with Whitaker started trending. Then hash bring back. Then simply hash let them love. And Gia watched it all from a stranger's couch. Her name suddenly a cause. She didn't want to be a movement. She wanted to be loved. But as she read message after message, as she saw people who had never felt seen finally claiming something raw and real, something shifted. They could take away the press room, the cameras, even the title. But they couldn't take her voice. That night, Gia opened her laptop. She began to write. Not for them, for her. And maybe, just maybe, for Eleanor. The article dropped at midnight. No press release, no warning, no editorial approval. Just Gia Lin logged into her old freelancer account, uploading 1,612 words that would ignite a nation. The headline was simple. I was never the distraction. I was the mirror. The piece didn't beg. It didn't accuse. It didn't even name names. But it carved through the silence like a blade. Gia wrote about being invisible in rooms built to keep people like her out. About being loved by someone who was expected to love quietly, conditionally, secretly. She wrote about how they met. About the mornings that felt like rebellion and the nights that felt like prayer. She wrote about how love was not the danger, but fear of it was. And at the end, she didn't ask for sympathy. She demanded truth. The article went viral within 20 minutes. 35 million views by sunrise. Celebrities reposted it. Activists quoted it. Politicians ignored it. But the people wept in cafes. Teenagers whispered the paragraphs to each other like scripture. In small towns, queer kids printed the final lines and taped them to their mirrors. If the truth costs everything, then everything was never mine to begin with. Eleanor read the article alone in the Oval Office, her staff pretending not to watch her reaction. She didn't blink, didn't flinch, but when she reached the end, she closed her laptop, stood, and said, "Clear my schedule. I'm going to find her." Gia was in Northbridge, back in the apartment she swore she'd never return to. The city moved around her loud and relentless, but her world had shrunk to the glow of a phone screen and the constant ping of her inbox. She hadn't expected it to matter this much, but it did because for the first time, she had told the story before someone else wrote it for her. A knock at the door nearly stopped her heart. She didn't check the peephole. She just opened it, and there she was, Eleanor in a black coat, hair pulled back, face raw, no security detail in sight. No press, just her. "Hi," Eleanor said. Gia didn't move. "You can't be here. I'm the president. You're 2 weeks away from impeachment. Then I wanted to see you before they locked the gates." Gia swallowed hard. "You read it 3 times. You didn't call. I didn't think I deserved to." Gia crossed her arms. "Then why now?" "Because you reminded me who I was before they taught me how to be afraid." "And what does that change?" "Everything." Eleanor stepped forward. "I didn't come here to beg. I came here to choose you. Us. No more hiding. No more pretending it's strategic to stay apart. I don't care if I lose everything, but I won't lose you again." Gia wanted to believe her, but belief wasn't enough anymore. "What about your stuff? The Senate, the legacy. They can write whatever story they want. I'm going to live mine." Silence stretched between them. The kind of silence that comes before something irreversible. "You broke my heart," Gia whispered. "Then let me spend the rest of my life fixing it," Eleanor said. "Not with words, with proof." Gia stood there, arms limp at her sides, breathing shallow. Then finally, she stepped aside. Eleanor entered the apartment like it was sacred, like she didn't deserve to be let in. "I've been sleeping in your shirt," she said softly. "It still smells like coffee and courage." "I wrote that in the article," Gia replied. "I know." They stood in the center of the room, not touching. "Not yet." "You don't have to save the country to be worthy of love," Gia said. "You don't have to be perfect to deserve me." Eleanor stepped closer. "And you don't have to disappear to protect me. I want the world to see you, every part of you with me. Then show them. I will. Not tomorrow. Now." Eleanor pulled out her phone. No PR team, no filter, no script. Turned the camera on herself and Gia, and hit record. "Hi, this is Eleanor Whitaker, President of the United States. I'm with Gia Lin. She's not a scandal. She's the love of my life." The post went up immediately. Chaos followed, but this time, together, they were ready. Within minutes of the video, the country split. Supporters flooded feeds with hearts, flags, and declarations of love echoing from coast to coast. Let them love trended again, joined by something new. Madam First Lady. Newsrooms scrambled. Pundits shouted. Congress panicked, but the people moved. Outside the Meridian House, hundreds gathered beneath rainbow banners. By noon, they were thousands, not protesters, protectors. Meanwhile, the machinery of government turned lethal. 3 senior officials drafted an emergency resolution citing abuse of public communication channels. For personal gain, a vote was set in 36 hours. That was all the time they had. Gia was back in Potomac City and hidden, unquiet. She walked through the Meridian House gates at Eleanor's side, hand in hand, daring anyone to challenge her. No one did. Inside, the Carters felt heavy. Some staff looked away. Others offered quiet nods, like soldiers witnessing a coup of the heart. Then Eleanor was summoned to a closed session with the Joint Committee. No phones, no notes, no Gia. Before entering, she turned to her. No matter what happens in there, she whispered, you already gave me more than any term ever could. Gia waited 1 hour, 2, then 3. Agent Cole brought her coffee and a look that said, brace yourself. When the door finally opened, Eleanor didn't speak. She just walked straight into Gia's arms and held on like the room was still spinning. They want me gone, she whispered into her neck. They think they've got the votes, do they? Maybe. Then we do it our way, which is let the country choose. The next morning, Eleanor held a press conference. This time, Gia stood behind her, visible, real, undeniable. The nation tuned in, some out of anger, some out of hope, but all watched. Eleanor spoke without teleprompters. No papers, just truth. There are people who believe my personal life makes me unfit to lead. That choosing honesty over secrecy is dangerous. That being in love makes me weak. But I ask, what kind of country do we become if love disqualifies us? What kind of leadership is built on denial instead of authenticity? I didn't choose this position to be a statue. I chose it to be a mirror to reflect not just who we've been, but who we could be. She turned then, reached back and took Gia's hand. This is Gia Lynn. She is not my shame. She is my strength. Silence. Cameras flashed. Somewhere a collective breath was held. And then applause. Not from the journalists. Not from the staff. From outside the walls, echoing in waves. Later that day, protesters became volunteers. Activists launched emergency campaigns. Law students filed petitions. Celebrities donated airtime. The resolution still went forward. A formal vote. All eyes on Congress. All eyes on her. Eleanor watched the numbers appear on the screen. Gia's hand in hers the entire time. 212. Yes. 219. No. Motion failed. She stayed. The Meridian House erupted, not with chaos, but with something rare. Hope. Back in the residence that night, Eleanor collapsed on the couch, head in Gia's lap, shoes kicked off. Exhaustion etched into every line of her body. You stayed, Gia whispered. I didn't. Eleanor looked up. We did. Gia leaned down, kissed her forehead. They tried to erase me. They tried to erase us. But you don't disappear, Gia said, fingers threading through her hair. You make everything around you clearer. Eleanor caught her hand and pressed it to her chest. I have 2 years left in office, maybe 4, if the world is feeling generous. But whatever happens now, I want you beside me publicly, permanently. Gia's breath hitched. What are you saying? I'm saying I want you to move in. Gia laughed incredulous. You're asking me to move into the Meridian House? I'm asking you to come home. Gia didn't hesitate then. Yes, they didn't sleep that night. Not from fear, from joy, from relief, from something finally real. Outside, America kept spinning. But inside that house, something shifted. They weren't a scandal. They were the future. The morning after the failed resolution, the air inside the Meridian House felt different. Lighter, sharper, charged with something electric. Eleanor and Gia walked through the East Wing like they belonged there because finally they did. No more hiding, no more deflecting. Gia's toothbrush sat beside the president's. Her mug joined the Meridian House china. Her laugh echoed through rooms that had only ever heard protocol. But freedom never came without retaliation. And now that Eleanor had survived the political attack, the personal one began. Overnight, the smear campaign shifted into high gear. Old photos from Gia's college days, taken out of context, were splashed across tabloids. Headlines screamed about radical influence and moral instability. In the Meridian House, a clip of Gia reading at a queer poetry night years ago was edited and posted to make her sound like she was inciting rebellion. The same people who once ignored her now dissected her every breath. Gia sat on the floor of the residence library, her phone vibrating every few seconds with messages, threats, and articles. She scrolled through the chaos, numb. "They're trying to make me into someone I'm not," she said. Eleanor kneeled beside her. "No, they're terrified of who you really are because you're not afraid of being seen. That's what they can't forgive." Gia looked up, eyes glossy. "They're not coming for you anymore. They're coming for me, and I don't have your armor, Eleanor took her hands. "Then take mine." The next move came not from Congress or a political party, but from a woman in North Carolina. An elementary school teacher named Caroline Harper posted a video in tears, holding Gia's article in one hand and a photo of her wife and daughter in the other. "They want us to believe she's dangerous," she said, voice trembling. "But if loving like this is dangerous, then I never want to be safe again." The video went viral. Others followed. A bakery in Texas named a cake after Gia. A senator in Oregon quoted her article on the Senate floor. Students began carrying signs that read, "Gia is America." Eleanor's team warned her. The tide was rising again, but this time it was with them. Still, the danger wasn't gone. At 3 a.m., Secret Service intercepted a credible threat. Gia's security detail tripled. New protocols, no solo outings, no open windows. When Eleanor heard, she broke the pencil in her hand and ordered a full investigation. "They can hate me," she said, "but if they touch her, I swear you'll start a war." Gia finished gently. "And I'd burn the world for you," Eleanor whispered. Gia kissed her to silence the tremble in her voice. "I don't need you to start a war. I need you to finish what we started." That morning, they hosted a youth town hall at the Meridian House. It wasn't about politics. It was about visibility. Gia stood beside Eleanor, taking questions from queer students who had flown in from around the country. One kid, 16, soft-voiced, wearing a rainbow pin, asked, "How do you love someone when the world keeps telling you not to?" Gia looked at Eleanor, then back at them. "By remembering that the world doesn't get a vote in your heart." That sentence made headlines again, but this time, no one tried to twist it. Even the media was starting to flinch under the pressure of a public that had found its voice. Behind closed doors, however, pressure mounted again. A group of major donors threatened to pull support unless Eleanor agreed to reduce Gia's public appearances. One even said, "This isn't a love story, Madam President. It's a liability." Eleanor didn't flinch. "Then take your money. I'm not up for sale, and neither is she." Later that night, Gia received an email from her old editor. No subject, just one line. "They tried to silence you. Instead, you became a chorus." Gia cried for the first time in weeks. Not from fear, from release. The world hadn't been kind to them. It might never be, but it wasn't winning anymore. They were together, and as they lay in bed, Gia whispered into Eleanor's skin, "If I lose everything but still have this, it was worth it." Eleanor answered without hesitation, "You'll never lose me. Not again." 2 months after the storm, the nation was no longer debating whether Gia Lynn belonged in the Meridian House. They were debating how long it had taken for someone like her to finally get there. The threats had faded into irrelevance. The impeachment efforts had collapsed under public pressure. And Eleanor Whitaker had never been more popular. Not because she compromised, but because she didn't. And Gia had gone from Ghost Rider to Lighthouse. She wasn't just present. She was everywhere. Her voice, her story, her calm defiance in the face of hate had become something more than headlines. She was a movement, a symbol, a reminder that vulnerability was not weakness and visibility was not vanity. It was survival. The nation had watched their love survive war. Now they were about to watch it transform into something even stronger. It started with a note, not an email, not a statement. A handwritten letter left on Gia's pillow one quiet morning. It read, "The first time I saw you, you laughed at something no one else noticed. I think I fell in love before I even knew your name. I've given speeches that changed lives, but you've changed me in ways I'll never be able to explain on paper. So instead, I'll just ask you, will you stay? Not just in this house, not just in this chapter, but in every chapter after. Love always." Gia read it twice before realizing she was crying. When she stepped out into the corridor, Eleanor was waiting in the dining room, empty except for a single box on the table. Inside it a ring, simple, elegant, powerful. Gia didn't speak. She walked straight to Eleanor, took her face in her hands, and said, "There's nowhere else I'd rather be." They didn't call it a wedding, not officially. The Constitution didn't exactly have a clause for First Lady marrying the President, but they called it a union, a vow, a promise louder than any inauguration. The ceremony was private, just family, closest friends, and Cole, who cried when Eleanor kissed Gia under the magnolia tree in the rose garden. Tess officiated. She called them the most stubborn, reckless, beautiful love story she'd ever seen. There were no tiaras, no fireworks, just sunlight, bare feet on government lawn, and to women who had bled their truths into the ground and bloomed anyway. After the ceremony, they walked back through the East Wing in silence, fingers entwined. In the hallway, one of the interns, barely 20, paused, breath held, and whispered, "Thank you." Eleanor smiled. "For what?" The intern shrugged. "For not choosing fear." Weeks passed. Gia moved fully into the residence, her books mixing with state documents, her playlists invading the Situation Room speakers, her laughter echoing through diplomatic chambers. The First Lady was no longer a role. It was a revolution. She launched a national youth program for queer teens, focusing on art, mental health, and visibility. She started a podcast, wrote a memoir, and every time someone asked her how it felt to be married to the most powerful woman in the world, she said, "She's not the most powerful woman because she's president. She's the most powerful because she chose me even when the world told her not to." Eleanor's second term began with Gia standing beside her on the Capitol steps. Cameras flashed. The nation held its breath. And as Eleanor swore to protect and serve her hand tightly in Gia's, it was no longer just a political oath. It was personal. Months later, during a televised interview, a journalist asked, "What would you tell your younger self, President Whitaker?" Eleanor looked at Gia across the room and said, "I tell her that the risk is always worth the truth. That hiding love doesn't protect it. It kills it. And that someday, if she's lucky, she'll find someone who makes the whole world worth losing. And when that day comes, I hope she doesn't run." The broadcast ended on a single, quiet image, Gia and Eleanor on the Truman balcony, watching the sun slip over the city. No speeches, no slogans, just joined hands, sensed heartbeats, history rewritten. Not in spite of love, but because of it. If you enjoyed this content and want to support the channel in a special way, tap the thanks button below the heart with the $sign. With super thanks, you can make a direct contribution that helps me keep creating videos for you.